Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up on this Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Turkey Day traditions are giving many of us agita after the election. A family therapist weighs in on surviving contentious dinner table discussions. Also, a Central Florida program addressing the root causes of hunger by setting grads up for long-term success. And a Rollins College student finding ways to bring people together and overcome differences using food. But first, it is Thanksgiving week, so you may be scouring through those family recipes that remind you of home, finalizing a holiday potluck menu, or searching for restaurants open on Thursday. Whatever your plans are, specific dishes probably come to mind if someone asks you to describe a traditional Thanksgiving meal. UCF cultural anthropologist Professor Ty Matejowsky specializes in food studies. We asked him to join Engage to shed some light on why we eat the cuisine we do on Thanksgiving Day. I started the conversation by asking why food is so significant to this holiday in particular.
Food is central to human life. So many of our institutions and our rituals revolve around food production and food consumption. So for a holiday specifically like Thanksgiving, where it's recognizing bounty and things that were bestowed upon us. One way of doing that in a very visceral sense is consuming food, gathering with family, and having people prepare food. Kind of shows care. It kind of shows gratitude in a very physical, meaningful, resonant sense of the term.
I want to talk to you about the origins of what we think of as a traditional Thanksgiving Day feast. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about the evolution? Where did we start when it came to celebrating Thanksgiving with that meal?
Okay. Thanksgiving, like most major U.S. holidays, kind of has a mythos around it, like this kind of celebrated known narrative that many of us recognize. But when we kind of peel back the onion and look at the specifics, it tends to be a little bit more nuanced, maybe less romanticized, but nonetheless very interesting. So some of your listeners may not realize, but Thanksgiving actually, as the holiday that we know it, wasn't established until 1863. So this is roughly 2 centuries after the Mayflower landed in Massachusetts. So many of us are familiar with kind of the story in 1621, after surviving their first brutal winter and establishing a stable food supply, the remaining members of the Plymouth colony held a 3-day harvest alongside the native Wampanoag peoples. And so, many of us think that at this meal, things like turkey, pumpkin pie, mashed potatoes, stuffing was served, but it was more reflective of the native foodstuffs that were available at the time. So while wild turkey may have been one of the side dishes, it's more likely that this meal included venison, corn, and probably seafood, given the nearby maritime location of the colony.
So I think if you ask someone today to describe a traditional Thanksgiving Day meal, turkey is probably going to top the list. Why is that?
Turkey was something that in the 1860s was kind of showcased and established as the traditional Thanksgiving meal, largely based on the efforts of magazine writer and editor Sarah Josepha Hale, who was behind a very popular magazine at the time, Godey's Ladies Book. And she's often kind of referred to as the mother of Thanksgiving. And in this publication, she publicized various types of turkey recipes in the magazine. So this kind of captured the imaginations of the reading public at the time. But what's interesting is that turkey, as a domesticated species, is more readily associated with central Mexico and the southwest United States. So around 2,000 years ago, species of turkeys were domesticated. The one that ended up going across the Atlantic and ending up in Europe was the Mexico domesticate, which then in turn came back to the eastern parts of North America. So it has kind of a interesting travel history and an interesting evolution.
You have me here wondering how much of what we eat for Thanksgiving is predicated on marketing. And something that comes to mind is my favorite, green bean casserole.
Sure. So green bean casserole is kind of like a more recent staple of Thanksgiving meals, and it is rooted in the Campbell Soup Company. So in post-war America, around the mid-50s, you had a individual, Dorcas Riley. She was a home economics staff member at the Campbell Soup Company who crafted this recipe, which brings together like staples of classic mid-century convenience food, canned onions, canned green beans, and of course, canned Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup. So many of us have been enjoying this particular dish at Thanksgiving dinner for decades now.
Let me ask you, stay with the canned theme. What's with the passion behind the canned cranberry and the debate with that and fresh cranberry? How did that become associated with Thanksgiving?
Okay. Well, so of all the foods that are kind of affiliated with traditional Thanksgiving meals, cranberries were probably the primary one that actually grew wild in the American Northeast. They had been eaten for centuries by indigenous Americans in these places. And what was known about cranberries as they could be harvested for a very limited basis, basically 2 months, mid-September to mid-November, and would have been consumed as kind of like a sweet-ish aspect of the meal. Ocean Spray began canning cranberries in 1912, and the company came out with a jellied cranberry sauce, the kind that, kind of keeps its shape when you expel it from the can, in 1941. So, I guess it comes down to individual preference, whether people prefer the fresh cranberries or the canned kind.
Huh. Something else that I personally don't find acceptable, in addition to the canned cranberry, would be the wet bread, which I think some people would call stuffing.
Correct. I even have a colleague who has like a distinct aversion to wet bread.
Yes.
He has conveyed that to me multiple times. But yeah, so stuffing actually as a dish, or what approximates stuffing as a dish, dates back at least to ancient Rome. There's evidence that people were using various types of stuffing, into various types of birds, whether it's chickens, quails, turkeys, or whatnot, things with herbs, chestnuts, onions. This goes back centuries. Interestingly, what is considered America's first cookbook, Amelia Simmons' 1796 American Cookery, actually has a recipe for stuffing involved. So what I like about stuffing is the fact that people, can kind of be creative with it. So, I know in my family, in my extended family, we have like one side of the family that prefers stuffing that has oysters in it, and another that does not. So it's a dish that allows people to express their own culinary preferences, I guess.
So you like it. So I appreciate the fact that you didn't walk out of this interview knowing my disdain for it. It seems to be very polarizing food. A couple other sides I want to throw at you. I'm wondering if does this get back to the celebration of the harvest? Just there's always some form of potato, whether it's mashed with gravy or a sweet potato. There's going to be a potato at a Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, so mashed potatoes, other types of potato dishes. Again, you find that potatoes are a Many of us see it as a staple item of kind of like a Euro-American kind of culinary foodways. But the roots of the potato actually go back to South America, likely to Peru, about 10,000 years ago. So it was probably the Spanish who brought the potato back to Europe, and then the Europeans during colonial times brought it back to parts of America, North America, where it became a very versatile staple that could be, cooked in various ways, including mashed potatoes, which many of us, enjoy during this time of year.
And what is your favorite part of the Thanksgiving meal? What are you looking forward to?
Okay, so I love turkey. I like the white meat. I love dressing slathered with gravy. I like green beans. In terms of dessert, you can never go wrong with pumpkin pie. Even since I was a little kid, that's always been like my go-to favorite in terms of dessert. And I always look forward to kind of gorging myself and then dealing with the after effects later on the couch, probably falling asleep.
Gorge and nap. I love it. I prefer sweet potato pie over pumpkin. That's another one that's debated.
Correct. I mean, it may reflect like regional variations in terms of, sweet potato pie, pumpkin pie. They all have similarities in terms of like taste, texture. Now that you have like the canning of, various types of foods like this, it becomes readily attainable year-round, not just around this time of year.
Professor Ty Matejowsky is a cultural anthropologist and interim chair of the Department of Anthropology at UCF, who specializes in food studies. There's more ahead here on Engage, how to navigate Thanksgiving holiday gatherings after the elections when opposing political views are all seated at the table. If you missed any part of our show today, you could always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen whenever it's convenient for you. The program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, an enterprising Rollins College student is using food to bring together members of the campus community.
I saw this course offered in religion and food, and I was thinking, well, I have this background. I love food. I have a religious connection to it. Might as well take the course. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a unique experience to me. It was something that a lot of people in different cultures throughout history were part of.
Joseph Poole joins Engage to talk about his program, Breaking Bread. But first, today we've talked about the origins of the Thanksgiving meal. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about how to keep the peace post-election at the dinner table. Some of you might be dreading the thought of sitting face-to-face with family or acquaintances who have opposing political views this year. You certainly are not alone, so we asked our friend to the program, marriage and family therapist Cherlette McCullough, about coming together for Thanksgiving this week after a divisive election season. She joined Engage to discuss some quick tips for healthy holiday boundaries.
The holidays are usually a time where people get together with family or with people who are similar to family, like friends who are very close to them, people that you share a very intimate emotional space with and share food, laughs, and stories. But for some people, for a number of reasons, the holidays bring up bad memories. It can bring up a lot of family conflict. It can bring up issues around finances. And because of that, a lot of people don't enjoy the holidays.
Taking that dynamic, which sounds like it can already be a stressful situation, adding in we're coming off of an election, which has been very divisive, what do you recommend people do if they're already stressing? Like, how in the world am I going to sit across the Thanksgiving table with my family that I don't agree with politically?
And I think that's a relevant question with where we are right now when it comes to the dynamics of our families and our personal values and what's really going on in our world right now. So coming together with family when there's dysfunction, when there is difference of opinions, when there is a lot of turmoil, when there is contention. So being mindful of allowing yourself to engage in conversations that are not healthy for you. So if you start noticing that the conversation is going into a very toxic place or unhealthy place, you have the power to excuse yourself. You have the power to stop engaging in that moment and not allowing yourself to get to that place where you're so deregulated and you get into this place of dysfunction, or you get into this place of irrational thinking where it becomes volatile. So before you get there, allow yourself to be excused, stop engaging, and move away from the conversation. So it brings us back to that place of boundaries. What are the boundaries? And not only about physical boundaries, but psychological boundaries. How far am I going to let myself get into this conversation? Because if you already know that this is a place of contention, this certain topic around the elections is a very volatile, hot topic. Going into that situation, going into the holidays, being mindful of how much of this am I going to give myself to when it comes to engaging?
Am I hearing you say that should we start preparing now for these events?
So, absolutely being proactive. If you anticipate that this particular topic is going to be one that's brought up during your family time during the holidays, going into that conversation, going into that place with a proactive plan. If the elections comes up, hey, this is how much I can give, or I'm not at a place where I can give anything in this type of conversation. I can't engage at all. So kindly getting up from the table, leaving that space and going into another space and coming back when that conversation is over. And it doesn't mean that you're avoiding it, but you're still being in control of yourself mentally of how far you're going to allow yourself to engage around this topic.
Okay, so it sounds like you just have to protect your own mental health like you would in any situation and kind of know your own limits.
Knowing your limits, but the main thing is being proactive, because we know that this is a place of contention. This topic is contentious, right? For a number of reasons. So being proactive, also being mindful of your boundaries and understanding your limits. What are your limits?
Cherlette, do you see any potential benefit in having difficult conversations and, sitting down with family to talk about differences? Or is that a terrible idea?
I think it is a good idea, but what makes it unhealthy or makes it more toxic is when the people or the family members who are engaging in that conversation become so angry, where the conversation becomes disrespectful, where it becomes volatile, where it could become physical, where it becomes a conversation where we start talking about things that's not included around the elections, where we start attacking each other personally. Hard conversations are necessary and they can be healthy, but they become unhealthy when the people involved aren't able to emotionally regulate during that time and able to stay on topic in a respectful manner and keep everyone's dignity intact.
Any other advice for people as we head into the holidays that are centered around families and, stressful times?
Absolutely. So a number of things. One, check in with yourself, being honest about how you're feeling, being aware of what you're feeling around the holidays. Another one, be mindful of self-medicating, going overindulging in any activity that's not healthy, being mindful of that. Also, understand that you can set boundaries and you can say no. You can say no to things that you don't want to do, that you can't afford, or things that are in conflict with your values and goals.
Is it healthy, or can it be healthy to just cut off family or friends due to political differences?
Well, I am a therapist that do believe that sometimes blocking people on social media, blocking people on your phone, or taking a break from family members around communicating with them. I am a therapist that do believe in that, because there are some things that happen to you or some things that can trigger you that can cause you to act out in a way that you do not want to act out. And to help yourself stay in that rational place, taking a break from family members, taking a break from friends, it could actually be a healthy thing. So yes, I do believe that you can have that cutoff for a period of time, or depending on the offense or how egregious it is, it could be for a long term. Around the holidays, people feel guilty around cutting family members off because there's an expectation that just because someone is family or just because I'm close to this person, I'm required to allow them in my space. And that's just not true. You have control over that, who's in your space, who allows you to feel safe in your space. You have the power to dismiss people or allow them to be in your space.
Cherlette McCullough is a licensed therapist at her practice, Centerpiece Couples and Family Therapy in Winter Park. When you think about Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida, you may think about their meal distribution. The nonprofit also has a culinary training program that addresses some of the root causes of hunger. It's a 16-week workforce program for adults living in Central Florida to gain the technical and life skills needed. The goal is achieving full-time employment in the hospitality industry. The program is celebrating a milestone, recently graduating its 500th student. Recruiting is happening now for the next class. We talked with a recent graduate, but first, we're speaking with Kiana Yearwood Branch, the culinary training program manager at Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. She starts our conversation by explaining some of the challenges program participants are facing.
When we're talking about barriers to employment, that's very wide, and I know that's very wide, but the most common is associated with skills. These are individuals that may not have the skills needed to get into these entry-level positions that we are kind of assisting them to go into. So we're talking about skills that are like knife skills. We're talking about stock soups and sauce, product identification, those kinds of things. As well as barriers to employment could mean the access is just not there where they live, where they're located in their zip code in their area. There may be things that they are experiencing in life that has contribute to them not being able to access these kinds of programming. So everyone is on a case-by-case basis, but what I like to say is everyone's invited that has some kind of barrier or feel as though they can't get a job that they're wanting to get because of something.
I know this isn't really the purpose, but I was kind of stunned to find out that this is free.
Yeah.
So how is that even possible?
Yeah, so I always say like it's free to our students and those that qualify. So we have qualifications, and some of those qualifications are you have to be of the age of 18, have to have an interest in the culinary industry, have to want to get full-time employment within the industry because that's part of our graduation requirement. And also, again, experiencing some kind of financial barrier or barrier to employment. While the program is free to those who qualify, yes, it does cost to run the program. So we have been fortunate enough to have great donors, great people that contribute to the program. There's a lot of different avenues in which we receive funding to make that cost of tuition free, grants and all those different things. So while yes, it is free to those who qualify, the program does cost, but it won't come out of the pockets of our students.
I think you might be able to argue that when people hear the name Second Harvest, they associate it with the food bank.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any kind of link between this culinary training program that we're talking about and addressing maybe some of the causes of hunger in our community?
Yeah, so we are a part of the food bank of Second Harvest. So when we talk about hunger, we're talking about something that is a symptom of poverty. So that is the underlining thing of what we do here at Second Heart. We want to get to the root of poverty. We want to start creating programming around there. I truly believe that, our program, we're talking about things like equity, job equity, access, those kinds of things. Those all fall in the line of what the work that we're doing here at Second Harvest, which is getting to the root of it. So yes, I think a lot of times it's associated, and a lot of people think our program, because we are in our food bank, that it has to do with, giving out boxes, giving out food, giving out, things to the community. While that is a part of Second Harvest, our main goal of our program is that work equity piece, that access to quality employment, good jobs. That is what we are trying to go after, because we understand that not everyone has access. Not everyone has the ability to go after great jobs. So we want to give those individuals that want that chance, we want to be able to give them that experience and give them that knowledge and give them that access.
Am I hearing you say that you're kind of providing these services and equipping these students within your program to, have kind of long-term success and be able to earn
Yeah.
higher wages long-term?
Yes.
Do you see any type of, I understand the individual, the economic benefits there. Do you see it benefiting just the Central Florida community overall? We're a big hospitality area, I'm thinking.
Right. Correct. Yeah. One of the things I always say, because growing up in a small community, a lot of the times we go out of our community. That's not what's happening here in Central Florida. Central Florida is a big hub for hospitality, so there's so many different opportunities. The issue that I find is that not many people know what lane they could possibly go into this industry. So what our job is to do is to expose. Not everyone's probably going to go into a theme park. Not everyone wants to go into a hotel, but there's other avenues in this industry that they can go into. And I think that's the beauty of here in Central Florida, because that's not always the case in other places, but that is the case here. There's different options for individuals to go into. So while, yes, it helps the overall Central Florida economy, I think what we really try to hone in on is just the diversity that is here that may not be somewhere else.
Can you kind of help me understand what a typical day is like? Are you sitting in a classroom, or is this kind of like a hands-on lab experience for the students?
It's a combination of both. So it's in the classroom and in the kitchen. It's not so much lectured forward, because this industry of culinary is very much a hands-on thing, but we still have to give them the basic knowledge of terminology, things like that. So they spend about an hour in the morning going through their lecture, and then from their lecture, they'll go into the kitchen, where whatever they're learning that day in lecture or that week always gets applied into the kitchen. So they go through about 12 different cuisines, they go through different techniques, and all that is a combination of both.
Not to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you could give me an example, or is there a student that really resonated with you that you just saw the change that this program made for them?
The one that first comes to my mind, she was a student about a year ago, and I think she comes to my mind just because she was our graduate speaker. She said something at our graduation that really, we don't hear it. We see the stories, we see, we know what happens to them throughout our program, and then they go on and they do great things. But she said, she was like, my family finally got to a place of financial stability. And it took our program staff, like, we were like, wait, whoa, wow, that is a bold statement, because that is our hope. That is always our hope, to get students from one place to another. And all that in between can, kind of either set them forth or put them back. But in seeing her journey, she was a stay-at-home mom. And then she had a lot of different things going on. The belief that she had to grow in herself, the belief that she could do it, and even going through the program and getting employment, it wasn't the easiest route for her. She was one of our top students, but it took her a little bit longer to get a job. And she had mentioned that, the job that she thought that she was going to get, that she was like ready, they didn't select her. And then she went to another one and they didn't select her. And the place that she is in now, when she got it, she was able to get promoted. And then now she was just like, I'm finally in a place of financial stability for the first time in my life. And I'm like, okay, we're doing something here.
Something that just struck me hearing you tell that story is There's no preconceived notion of what someone who may benefit from the services of food bank is. These are just people, like you just mentioned, she was a stay-at-home mom, just people in our community.
Correct.
Excellent.
Correct.
I know you are recruiting for your next class. What kind of information would you like to share in terms of recruiting for the next class?
Yeah, in recruiting for the next class, I think the biggest thing I've always say is that you have to be willing to take a chance on yourself, because this program, I love it to death, but 100%, it's not the easiest program, and it's not easy for a plethora of different things. It's because life still goes on while you're going through this program. Life doesn't stop while you go through this program. And the one thing I tell students every single time from the beginning to the end of the program and beyond is just allow yourself to become. Take the chance on yourself, take the chance on your dream. It is possible. And while, yes, a lot of people are like, is it really free? Is it? Yes, it is really free, but in understanding that it is free, understanding that we are going to push you to certain points because you're asking us to get the best out of you. So I think that's one of the things I always say just to the community, even when I go out to community events, is that just take the chance on yourself. Because what you can become at the other side, it changes people's perspective about themselves. And that's really what we try to do here is, if you're saying that you're coming to us because you want a chance at going after a dream, going into the culinary industry, being exposed to different things, learning different cuisines, you're saying that to us, that's what you want, understand that's what we're going to give you.
Kiana Yearwood Branch is the Culinary Training Program Manager at Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. Angeline Cruz graduated from the program about a year ago and recently returned to speak at the most recent graduation ceremony. Since her time in this training, she started an internship at a local hotel and resort and has been promoted to pastry cook. She joined Engage to discuss why she invested in the program as a means of obtaining long-term security for her family. She begins our conversation by explaining she was at a crossroads in her life when she first encountered the training.
Before I knew anything about the Second Harvest program, I was a stay-at-home mom. At the time, I spent about 3 years with my son at home. And finally, when I got to the time where he was ready for school, he enrolled in Head Start. And after he was established in Head Start, the social worker there offered me kind of like a goal plan or something like that to kind of get my life started after being at home for so long. And she talked a little bit about the Second Harvest program, and it aligned with the goals that I had of having my own coffee shop in the future. So I figured I would give it a try just to get a little experience in the culinary field.
So tell me about the program specifically. Which parts did you enjoy of the class? Was it the hands-on, the classroom setting, or what stuck out to you?
So my favorite part about the Second Harvest program was really the motivation that the leaders had to see you succeed. The program is set up in a way where any obstacle that you can encounter in life, they're going to help you get through it. So for example, they had the life skills class, and the life skills class really dives into lessons about stress management, lessons about dealing with hardship in life, and lessons about managing stress while you're in the workplace. And there was also this financial literacy aspect of the class where they would go through any hardship that you may be going through financially. They gave you classes for budgeting, planning for the future, learning how to save money, and things like that. And those were, aside from the experience that you get hands-on with the culinary training, those really stuck out for me because it's just so comprehensive, the class.
What difference has the culinary training program made to you, to your family, in your life?
Well, a big difference. Before I started Second Harvest, I was obviously jobless. I had no job. I had no real experience career-wise. Most of my experience before that was in the service hospitality industry. And so after going through the culinary training, I had that experience to where I could go to any culinary field and apply for it and get a good paying job as a cook. And so now that I'm getting paid as an actual hotel employee, I'm financially stable now. I'm able to pay my bills on time. I'm able to take my kid out whenever I want to. It's been life changing.
When people think of Second Harvest, I think they often associate it with the food bank.
Yes.
Do you see any correlation between the program you're in and combating hunger in any way?
Oh yes, of course. And like I said, the program is tailored so much on getting through different hardships in life. And that was one of the things that the training focused on. Like we never had to pay for food when we were there. There was always breakfast provided for us. There was always lunch provided for us. And every meal that we made was never wasted. We would always make everything in banquet style, and all of those meals would go out to people that needed food. Throughout the time that I was there, we did have opportunities to volunteer as well. And we did have a chance to go through all of the operation that Second Harvest Food Bank goes through to get the meals out to all of the food pantries. And it's just really amazing being in that environment where you're constantly reminded that the place that you're in is serving the community in such an important way.
It sounds like this has really set you up for long-term success as well.
Definitely, it has. I found a passion that I never knew that I had. Me going into culinary training was just something that I was trying to see if it was going to work out. And while I was in it, I discovered that it was a passion of mine, baking, cooking, and just being reminded that through food, you can just do so much for people. You can serve people in so many different ways. So it's definitely has been life changing for me. There are times in life where your inner self is really battling and trying to get through out into the world, and you may not know how. But when the opportunity strikes and you see that you have the potential of making a difference in the world, maybe it through food, maybe it through, being a public speaker or whatever the case may be, if you see that opportunity, don't hesitate on taking it. That's just life kind of putting you into the place where you need to be.
That was Angeline Cruz, a graduate of Second Harvest Food Bank's culinary training program. Coming up, a Rollins College student sets the table for culinary diplomacy among strangers to facilitate interactions and understanding. You are listening to Engage on the Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. The U.S. Department of State actually uses food as a tool of diplomacy. The State Department is part of a diplomatic culinary partnership initiative. As the name of the program implies, it puts food and hospitality at the center of international relations on a global stage. In Central Florida, a Rollins College student is behind an intentional effort to build bridges in this community while breaking bread. Joseph Poole is in his third year at Rollins College in Winter Park, studying public policy and economics. During his studies, he took a course in food and religion. Along with a professor, Poole explored research on the role of food in dialogues and transcending cultural differences. Then, he created a student organization at Rollins called Breaking Bread. The growing club gives everyone a seat at the table to meet and share a meal. Joseph Poole joined Engage to talk about how it's building connections and overcoming conflicts. He starts the conversation by explaining the origins of his passion for this project.
I grew up in a Jewish Moroccan household. And so a lot of my way of connecting with my family, but also cultural and historical identity, was through food. It was every week the family got together and it was meals that we had together. Spicy Moroccan fish balls with the cumin, the paprika. And additionally, as a kid, I grew up going to my grandparents' house and sleeping over there every weekend, knowing that I would be spoiled beyond belief. And it was from my grandma having mint tea and cookies every weekend that I got to know more about my family, more about my history, about my religion, about what we stood for, what I should do. And so it was something I took for granted for most of my life. And coming to Rollins, I realized just how much I missed it. And I saw this course offered in religion and food. And I was thinking, well, I have this background. I love food. I have a religious connection to it. Might as well take the course. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a unique experience to me. It was something that a lot of people in different cultures throughout history were part of. I loved the course and spoke with the professor, and we did collaborative research the following summer on the role that food plays in interreligious dialogue specifically. We were able to get it presented at a conference, the Parliament of the World's Religions, with 7,000 attendees, I believe. And right now we're working on publication. We have the draft submitted to the publisher and it's coming through. And we've really been just enjoying that. We've been enjoying the process, and through it, it inspired us to start the club. There's this idea of food diplomacy. You can use food, and it's nice to write about it in theory, but I wanted to put it into practice. I wanted to eat and I wanted to get to know people. Might as well make a club about it. And so we did.
Joseph, what do you hear from other students in the club?
I know a lot of people that, to be honest, initially came for the food. It was this idea that food's this tool of connection, and we promised there would be food at every meeting and really good food. And that was what got people in the door at first. It was for the meal itself. And then we started adding this cultural aspect. We added this connection aspect. We had, instead of icebreakers, bread breakers at the different tables for people to get to know each other and connect. There were activities, there were themed meals based on if it was a cultural day or heritage month. And from that, we started to have really this cultural aspect and connection. We partnered with some of the different identity-based organizations and now even administrative departments to further that. What I've heard from students, though, besides it being delicious, is that it's one of their favorite clubs, if not their favorite, on campus. They've been able to come to these meetings, they've brought friends in, we've grown significantly, and it's become really, this semester especially, almost a phenomenon on campus where we're getting reached out to by a bunch of clubs wanting to work together. A bunch of students are hearing about this food club and checking it out and falling in love with this idea of not just food, but connection and cultural and intellectual exchange. We have debates now over food.
Do they stay civil?
They do. And I think the food actually plays a big part of it. It's really hard to be angrily yelling and jumping at the person who's handing you a plate of cookies from across the table. I say that not really jokingly, though, because I do think this food, and from our research, the food and the meal itself play a role in facilitating the conversation. It gives you, in a debate, you're trying to find a common ground, perhaps, and it gives you the first, easiest, basic common ground. Everyone needs food to live. We all like to eat food. Very simply, there you go. You have your first connection and you can easily build from there.
How do you pick like the meeting times? Is that already set, and the topics that you talk about?
The meeting times have been something that last year I realized it was helpful to just put everything on a calendar at once. And so I found this consistent. Last year, it was the third Thursday of the month, every month. It was super easy. This semester, it's been the third Monday, just based on everyone's class schedules. I had the members vote on times that work best for them. You can, especially in a larger club, you can never accommodate everyone's schedule, but I try to accommodate most with those monthly eatings, as we've called them, and the other events I try to have on different days and times to accommodate and for that fact.
Is there any sense of, when we're talking about just the human connection here, do you feel like that the club is filling in some holes that people may be missing in terms of just feeling like they belong?
I think absolutely it is. And I know this because there's people in the club that are not part of any other club on campus. There's people in the club who are not part of an identity group that has an organization dedicated to it. They're not part of normal campus life. Maybe they're a commuter student, maybe they're from out of town, maybe they just came back from being abroad. And that every meeting's open and easy has been a really big help, I think, for people feeling they belong. And that it's such a big club, I think also helps that it's not a cliquish, oh, it's the same friend group that goes every time. It's different people. You don't feel pressured to be a part of an existing group. Every meeting, people are forming new groups.
Is there a meeting that kind of stands out to you, whether it be something you learned or even just the food was amazing that time?
There's two that stick out to me. One wasn't so much a meeting as it was an event we did at the end of last year. And we partnered with the Center for Religious and Spiritual Life on campus. We also partnered with Hillel, with the Muslim Student Union, with the Catholic Campus Ministry, and a few other religious and identity orgs, and put on the Festival of Lights, as we called it, where Hanukkah, Diwali, Christmas, and a few other holidays were coinciding. And so to celebrate not just the common theme of food, but the common theme of light in many different religious traditions, we put on this big outdoor festival. Everyone brought food and light from their culture, from their religion. And it was really well attended, including the college president and members of the local community.
Very cool. What are your plans for this? Are you hoping to expand this outside of the school or maybe even within it?
Within school, this year has been a lot of expansion in terms of partnering not just with other clubs, but now with administration, with different departments on campus. The goal, I see it as a way to expand beyond campus. I see it in a weird way, not becoming the club that it is now, but becoming almost a tool. The use of breaking bread. It's no longer about just, here's my version of breaking bread. It's breaking bread as this idea, turning it in some way into something others can adopt, whether that's on other campuses, whether that's in the local community, to just get together and break bread. There's a format that works. There's food that works. And I think it's really conducive to creating connections and community.
So we're just a couple days out from Thanksgiving, a time typically friends and family, sit down together for a shared meal. Is there anything else you would like to add that our audience should hear? Absolutely. As it relates to Thanksgiving, I know there's a lot of people worried going in about, oh, is it going to be politics? Is it going to be religious? What's the debate going to be at the table? But try to reframe it. Think of it this way. You're at the table together. You're eating food together. That's common ground. Build from there. Don't try to take down the common ground. Try to find it, build it up. I promise it makes the food much tastier when you're not being yelled at while eating it. It pays to break bread at Thanksgiving. In general, food's been this great tool, I've realized, and people have way more in common than not. That's the biggest takeaway I've had from this whole experience so far, is it's very easy to go, oh, they voted differently than me. Oh, they look differently than me. Oh, they practiced something differently than me. But there's so many commonalities, and food's just been my favorite one to try. And who knows what happens next? Who knows which ones we can discover when we start with a shared meal? Rollins College student Joseph Poole founded the Breaking Bread Student Organization. That's all for today's edition of Engage. Engage airs Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 in the afternoon. All of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.